Nice ink, Dune, mall special, trying to look tough. The words hit the prep room at Blacksite Facility 7 like a bucket of ice water at 11:40 p.m. on a Tuesday that refused to cool down. Major Alec Rowan stood in the doorway with 4 officers flanking him, their boots still tracking sand from the perimeter walk. His smile was the kind that never reached the eyes, the kind that said he'd already decided you weren't worth the air conditioning that had given up 3 hours ago. Lieutenant Cara Dune didn't look up from the clipboard. The prep room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that industrial blue-white glow that made everyone look either dead or about to be. She wore a black tank top because 32 degrees Celsius didn't care about dress code, and the snake tattoo coiled around her left shoulder was visible for the first time in 6 months. Just a snake, nothing fancy, the kind of ink you'd see on 1,000 shoulders and 1,000 bars, near 1,000 bases. Alec took 3 steps closer. His boots were spit-shined, his uniform pressed with creases sharp enough to cut. Everything about him screamed career officer who'd learned that image mattered more than substance. "I asked you a question, Lieutenant." Cara inhaled for 4 seconds, held for 4, exhaled for 4. The combat breathing technique was so automatic she didn't realize she was doing it, the same way a pianist doesn't think about where middle C lives. She adjusted her grip on the pen, thumb along the barrel, index finger positioned for pressure point strikes if the pen suddenly needed to be something other than a pen. Then she signed the bottom of the detainee transfer form and set the clipboard on the metal table with a soft click that sounded too loud in the silence. "Blacksite Barbie plays Warrior," Sergeant Maya Brooks said from behind Alec, holding up her phone. The camera flash popped twice. "This is going in the group chat." The 4 officers laughed. It was the kind of laughter that came easy when you were standing with the boss, when the target couldn't fight back without proving every assumption they'd already made about you. Chief Warrant Officer Dale Hutchins stood near the corner observation window, 55 years old with Gulf War ribbons that predated half the people in the room. He wasn't laughing. He was watching the way Cara held that pen, the way her thumb naturally found the strike point, the way her breathing stayed controlled when most people would have flushed red or looked away. His eyes narrowed just slightly, the kind of recognition that comes from seeing the same muscle memory in 100 training cycles. Alec picked up the clipboard, scanned the signature, then dropped it back on the table. "You're up for interrogation of detainee 773 in 20 minutes. High-value target, suspected ties to Crescent Syndicate arms trafficking. I'm sure you've read the file." Cara nodded once. "Speak when you're spoken to, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir," Cara said. Her voice was level, no emotion, the kind of tone that could have been discussing weather or war crimes with equal investment. "Good. Let's see if you can handle paperwork without crying." Alec turned toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Dune? Maybe admin suits you better, less stress. Somewhere you can put those organization skills to use without putting actual operations at risk." The door closed behind him and his entourage. The fluorescent lights kept buzzing. Cara returned to the file on the table, flipping through detainee psych profiles and known associates like nothing had happened, because, in her world, nothing had. She'd heard worse in 4 languages, delivered by people who had actually earned the right to judge. Hutchins stayed by the window. He didn't say anything, but when Cara glanced up, she caught him staring at her hands. At the way the pen rested in a grip that wasn't civilian, wasn't even standard military. It was the kind of hold you learned when pens became backup weapons and every object became a tool. "That's not amateur," Hutchins muttered to the logistics officer beside him, quiet enough that it almost disappeared under the hum of failing climate control. Cara heard it anyway. She always heard everything. 3 years of operating in environments where missing a whisper got you killed had a way of tuning your ears to frequencies other people filtered out. She adjusted the chair positioning for the interrogation room, angling it 37 degrees from the door, standard placement for controlling sightlines and exit routes. Muscle memory didn't ask permission. It just moved your hands while your brain caught up. Something small and metallic hit the floor near her boot. A challenge coin, the kind units handed out for recognition or camaraderie. This one was different. Worn brass, 3 snake heads forming a triangle, each head facing outward. The kind of coin you didn't buy online, the kind you earned in places that didn't exist on paper. Cara picked it up without looking directly at it, pocketed it in one smooth motion. Hutchins saw. He didn't react, but she knew he saw because his posture changed, shoulders going back just slightly, the way people stand when they've just realized they missed something important. If you've ever been underestimated, hit that like button. This story proves silence can be the loudest weapon. The group chat notification lit up 7 phones simultaneously at 11:51 p.m. Brooks had posted the photo with a caption that got 43 reactions in 90 seconds. "Wannabe operator at Blacksite. Guess they're letting anyone in now." The comments came fast. "Cute ink. Does it come with a participation trophy?" Maybe she thinks it makes her scary. "Admin is hiring. Just saying." Kara saw none of it. She was 3 rooms away, standing in the observation area outside Interrogation Chamber 4, studying the one-way glass that showed an empty chair under a spotlight. The detainee would arrive in 8 minutes. She'd have 30 to 40 minutes to break him, standard window before lawyers or medical checks interrupted. No pressure, just her first high-value interrogation at a facility where half the staff thought she'd gotten the assignment because quotas needed filling. Alec's voice crackled over the comm system. "Dune, you're running point on 773. Remember, this isn't a training exercise. We need actionable intel on Crescent supply routes, not feelings and apologies. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Fantastic. Command is watching, so try not to embarrass us." The comms clicked off. Kara pulled up the detainee file on the terminal. Jamal Corey, 42, suspected logistics coordinator for Crescent Syndicate. 3 prior interrogations, 0 actionable intel, classified as resistant, trained in counter-interrogation. Psychological profiles suggested leverage points around family and legacy. Medical history showed. The screen went black. She tapped the keyboard. Nothing. Checked the connection. Secure. Rebooted the terminal. The login screen appeared. She entered credentials and got a red error message. Access denied. Insufficient clearance. Kara checked her watch. 11:56 p.m. 4 minutes until Corey arrived. She tried the backup terminal across the room. Same error. Someone had revoked her access 15 minutes before the most important interrogation of her assignment, which meant someone wanted her to walk in blind, stumbling through questions with no prep data, no psychological leverage, no edge. She closed her eyes, inhaled 4 seconds, held 4, exhaled 4. Then she walked to the 3rd terminal in the corner, the one marked for maintenance use only, and pulled up a command prompt that shouldn't have existed on a locked-down government system. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the speed of someone who'd done this in darker places under worse conditions. 6 lines of code, a backdoor protocol that only 6 people on Earth knew existed, and 5 of them were listed as killed in action in a classified file that most of Blacksite's leadership didn't have clearance to read. The screen flickered. Green text populated. "Welcome, Viper 3. Every file on Jamal Corey bloomed across the display. Psych profile, known associates, family structure, financial records, interrogation transcripts from Kabul, Ramadi, and a Blacksite in Poland that officially never existed. 8 minutes of reading compressed into 4 minutes of photographic processing. Kara's eyes tracked left to right, absorbing leverage points, noting contradictions in his previous statements, mapping the network of relationships that made him valuable. At midnight exactly, the door behind her opened. Hutchins stepped through, carrying a tablet. He glanced at her terminal, saw the green text, saw the clearance level that shouldn't be accessible to a lieutenant doing her first Blacksite rotation, and his expression shifted through 3 stages: confusion, recognition, and something close to respect. "You need the camera angles adjusted," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Northeast quadrant, 15 degrees lower, catches micro expressions better under spotlight glare." Hutchins nodded, tapped his tablet 3 times. "Done. Anything else?" "No, sir, thank you." He left without another word, but the look he gave her on the way out said volumes. Kara returned to memorizing Corey's network map. The Crescent Syndicate wasn't just arms trafficking. They were a hydra with fingers in 6 countries, moving everything from artillery shells to encrypted communications gear. Corey knew the supply routes, the middlemen, the payment structures. He was 3 layers deep in an organization that had been untouchable for 5 years, and someone at Blacksite had just tried to sabotage her shot at cracking him. The prep room door opened again. Alec walked in with Commander Jet Navarro, a SEAL team operator whose reputation preceded him like a weather front. Navarro wore casual fatigues, no name tape, the kind of operator who didn't need insignia to command a room. He was here investigating leaks, rumors of compromised intel bleeding out of Blacksite into enemy hands. Alec had been playing helpful host for 3 days, cooperative and transparent, the model of institutional integrity. "Commander, this is Lieutenant Dune. She'll be running Corey's interrogation tonight." Alec's smile was all teeth and no warmth. First time handling a high-value target solo, exciting opportunity for her. Navarro studied Kara with the flat assessment of someone who had spent 20 years evaluating threats and assets in the span of a handshake. "Lieutenant, heard you had some access issues with the terminals." "Resolved, sir." "Good. Corey's a hard target. Don't expect miracles in one session." "Understood, sir." Navarro nodded and moved to the observation window. Alec lingered near Kara's terminal, close enough to see the screen, close enough to notice she'd somehow accessed files that should have been locked. His jaw tightened just slightly, a muscle near his temple flexing, and Kara knew she'd just made an enemy out of someone who had only been casually cruel before. "Impressive," Alec said softly. "Didn't know lieutenants had that kind of clearance." "Emergency protocols, sir. Regulation 67 Bravo allows terminal access restoration through maintenance backdoors during active interrogations if primary access fails." It was complete nonsense. Regulation 67 Bravo dealt with food service hygiene, but Alec didn't know that, and he couldn't call her out without admitting he'd sabotaged her access in the first place. His smile went brittle at the edges. "Resourceful," he said. "Let's hope you're as resourceful with Corey. Wouldn't want command thinking we're wasting their time." 2 guards escorted Jamal Corey into the interrogation chamber at 4 minutes past midnight. He wore an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed to a belly chain, ankles shackled with 18 inches of movement, mid-40s, graying beard, eyes that tracked every corner of the room, like a man who had been in enough cells to know which shadows hid cameras. He sat down in the metal chair across from the empty interrogator's seat and waited with the patience of someone who'd outlasted 3 interrogations before this one. Kara entered from the side door, carrying a slim folder and a bottle of water. She set both on the table, uncapped the water, and pushed it toward Corey without a word. Then she sat down, opened the folder, and started reading. Not looking at him, not asking questions, just reading, as if he were a mildly interesting lab result. Corey waited 30 seconds. Then, "You are new." Kara turned a page. "The others, they come in angry. You come in bored." Another page turned. In the observation room, Alec leaned toward the glass. "What is she doing?" Navarro didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Kara's posture, the way she controlled the silence, turning it into a weapon that made Corey speak first. Hutchins stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching the northeast camera feed on his tablet, where Corey's face filled the frame at the perfect angle for catching every micro-expression. "I have been here before," Corey continued. "I will be here after you. You will ask about routes. I will say nothing. You will threaten. I will say nothing. We will both waste time." Kara closed the folder, looked directly at him for the first time. "Your daughter is getting married next spring." Corey's expression didn't change, but his left hand twitched against the belly chain. A tenth of a second, barely visible, but the northeast camera caught it in perfect clarity. "Alayla, 24 years old. She teaches English in Amman. Her fiancé is a civil engineer who builds water treatment facilities. Good man. You approved of him in your last letter, the one you sent through your lawyer 8 months ago. Many fathers have daughters. She visits your wife every Thursday. They have coffee at the same cafe on Al Rainbow Street, the one with the blue awning. She brings photos of the wedding venue, talks about flowers and guests and the future you won't be part of because you decided loyalty to Crescent was worth more than watching her walk down the aisle." Corey's breathing changed, slower, controlled, the kind of control that takes effort. "You think I betray my people for a wedding?" He leaned forward as much as the chains allowed. "I have survived worse than this, worse than you." Kara opened the folder again, pulled out a single photograph, and slid it across the table. Satellite imagery of a warehouse compound in Ramadi, dated 3 weeks ago. Red circles marked 3 vehicles, timestamps showing arrival and departure synchronized with known Crescent logistics patterns. Route 17. Your network moves modified artillery shells through Ramadi to a buyer in Mosul every 3rd Thursday. The shells are retrofitted with remote detonation systems, sold to insurgent cells who use them against civilian targets. Last month, one of those shells killed 14 people at a marketplace. 6 were children. I move boxes. I do not choose what is inside. You choose who gets them. Kara pulled out another photo. A woman in her 30s, standing outside a destroyed building, holding a child's shoe. This is Rania Khoury, same last name as you. Distant cousin, lives in Mosul. Her son was 7. His name was Omar. He died because a shell you moved ended up in the wrong hands. For the first time, Khoury looked directly at the photograph. His jaw worked silently. Family matters to you, Kara said quietly. So, let me tell you what happens if you walk out of here with your silence intact. Crescent will assume you talked. They always do with prisoners who get released. They'll make an example, probably through Layla, because hurting daughters sends better messages than threatening sons. And when she's gone, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you protected people who killed your own family. You are guessing. You know nothing. Kara reached into the folder one more time and pulled out a phone transcript, text messages between 2 numbers flagged by NSA intercepts. The messages were in Arabic, translated in red text below. The conversation discussed cleaning up loose ends and mentioned the engineer's wedding in Amman. The date stamp was 4 days old. Khoury stared at the transcript. His hands weren't twitching anymore. They were gripping the belly chain hard enough to make the metal creak. You have 48 hours before they move, Kara said. Maybe less. So, you can sit here protecting people who are already planning to kill your daughter, or you can give me Route 17's supplier network, and I make sure Crescent thinks you died during transfer. New identity, new location. You missed the wedding, but Layla lives to have one. The silence stretched for 15 seconds, 20, 30. In the observation room, Alex's face had gone carefully blank. Navarro leaned forward, eyes locked on Khoury's expression, watching the exact moment a hard target started to crack. What would you do with no medical team and a dying prisoner? Comment below, because Kara's next move will shock you. Khoury opened his mouth to speak. Then his face went gray. Not pale. Gray, the color of concrete and ash. His right hand flew to his chest, clawing at the orange fabric, like he could tear through to whatever was crushing his lungs. The belly chain rattled. His mouth opened wider, gasping for air that wouldn't come, and he pitched forward against the table with a thud that rattled the bottle of water. Kara was moving before he hit. She kicked her chair back, rounded the table, and caught him as he slumped sideways. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, skin cold and slick with sweat. No breath sounds, no pulse at the carotid artery. Medical to interrogation 4 now, Kara snapped toward the camera. Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack, just shifted from interrogator to battlefield medic in the space between words. She lowered Khoury to the floor, tilted his head back, checked his airway. Clear. Started chest compressions, heel of her hand on the sternum, shoulders over her hands, pushing 100 compressions per minute with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done this under fire. In the observation room, Alec grabbed the radio. Medical team to chamber 4, detainee in cardiac arrest. The response came back crackling with static. Medical is locked on level 2 for drill protocols, estimated 8 minutes to your location. 8 minutes? Navarro's voice went flat. Override it. Can't, sir. Safety protocols require full... Override the protocol. Sir, regulations state... Navarro ripped the radio from Alec's hand and keyed the mic. This is Commander Navarro. Priority Alpha clearance. Break your drill and get a team to level 3 interrogation now, or I'm having every one of you brought up on charges. Move. A pause. Then, copy, Commander. En route, 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Khoury had been down for 90 seconds. Brain damage started at 4 minutes without oxygen. Death got likely around 6. Kara kept compressions going, counting silently, watching Khoury's picky for any sign of response. Nothing. His lips were turning blue. She needed a defibrillator, an airway kit, epinephrine, anything except an empty room and a body that was deciding whether to quit. Alec leaned close to the glass, his voice barely a whisper. She's going to lose him. Maybe, Navarro said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes never left Kara. He was watching her form, the way she kept compressions rhythmically perfect, even as sweat soaked through her tank top. The way she didn't panic or freeze or call for help that wasn't coming. He'd seen combat medics work through worse, but this was supposed to be a lieutenant on her first Blacksite rotation, someone who should be fumbling through training protocols and hoping for backup. She wasn't fumbling, she was operating. 2 minutes. Kara checked for pulse. Nothing. Back to compressions. Her shoulders burned. The air in the room was 32 degrees and climbing, heat radiating off the spotlight overhead. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She didn't stop. At 2 minutes 40 seconds, she had to make a choice. Keep compressions going until medical arrived, and hope Corey's brain survived 7 minutes of inadequate oxygen, or switch to rescue breathing and risk breaking rhythm. She chose compressions. Brain damage was survivable. Dead wasn't. 3 minutes. Her arms felt like concrete. The muscles in her back screamed. She locked her elbows, used her body weight instead of strength, and kept the rhythm going. 100 per minute. No variation, no hesitation. In the observation room, Hutchins was watching his tablet, watching the way Kara's technique stayed flawless under pressure, the way she counted silently with the precision of someone who'd performed CPR in the back of helicopters and blown out buildings and places where stopping meant people died. "She's done this before," Hutchins said quietly, "under fire." Navarro didn't respond, but something shifted in his expression. Recognition starting to bloom. 4 minutes. Corey's face was fully blue now. Kara's vision tunneled at the edges, her breath coming hard. The EMT jacket she'd worn into the room was soaked through, clinging to her shoulders. It was restricting movement, adding weight, making each compression harder. She needed it off. But stopping compressions to remove the jacket meant losing rhythm, losing time, losing Corey. She made the calculation in half a second, kept compressions going with her right hand, used her left to yank the zipper down, shrugged one shoulder free, then the other, never breaking the count. The jacket hit the floor in a heap. She was down to just the black tank top now, skin slick with sweat under the spotlight's glare. Her shoulders ached, her back screamed. She didn't care. 5 minutes. In the observation room, Alec was smiling, not obviously, just a slight curl at the corner of his mouth, the expression of someone watching a problem solve itself. If Corey died during interrogation, it went in Kara's record. First solo, high-value target, dead in her custody. Career over before it started. He leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable. Navarro was thinking something else entirely. He was thinking about the way Kara's compressions stayed perfect at 5 minutes, when most people would have started making mistakes. He was thinking about the muscle memory that didn't come from a weekend first aid course. He was thinking about the 3 snake heads on a challenge coin that shouldn't exist, and the way her breathing stayed controlled even when her body was failing, and the fact that someone had cut her terminal access 15 minutes before an interrogation that was now going catastrophically wrong. Hutchins was thinking about that pen grip. 6 minutes. Kara's hands were numb. She couldn't feel the sternum under her palms anymore, just operated on training and will. Corey's chest rose and fell with each compression, mechanical and lifeless. No breath sounds, no pulse. She was keeping blood moving through sheer force, buying time for medical to arrive, buying time for a heart that had decided to stop. The door burst open at 6 minutes 30 seconds. 2 medics rushed in with a crash cart and an airway kit. Kara moved aside instantly, hands up, giving them room. They took over compressions, slapped electrode pads on Corey's chest, charged the defibrillator. Clear, shock. Corey's body jerked. The monitor flatlined, charged again. Clear, shock. The monitor spiked, stuttered, then settled into an irregular rhythm. "We got pulse," the lead medic said. "Weak, but present. Get him on O2 and prep for transport." They loaded Corey onto a gurney, hooked him to portable monitors, and wheeled him out in under 90 seconds. The interrogation room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of Kara's breathing, slow and controlled, coming back down from the adrenaline spike. She stood there for a moment, hands on her knees, tank top soaked through, hair plastered to her neck. Then she straightened, rolled her shoulders once, and walked toward the door without looking at the observation window. She knew they were watching. She didn't care. Corey was alive. That was the only number that mattered. In the observation room, Navarro pulled out his phone and opened a secure database most of Blacksite's staff didn't know existed. He typed in a search query. Serpent Recon, status Ka, recovery, none. 6 results appeared, 6 names, 6 faces, all marked killed in action during an operation at coordinates 34 degrees north, 48 degrees east. The date was 3 years old. The classification level was so high that accessing the file triggered automatic alerts to JSOC headquarters. Navarro didn't care about the alerts. He was looking at the 6th name on the list. Captain Cora Voss. Call sign, Viper 3. Status, killed in action. Body, not recovered. The photo attached to the file showed a woman in full tactical gear, face partially obscured by a helmet and neck gaiter, but the eyes were unmistakable. He'd seen those eyes before, 3 years ago, in a burning building in Kandahar, where a recon operator he'd never met pulled him through a doorway seconds before the roof collapsed. He'd never seen her face, never caught a name. She'd just disappeared into smoke and chaos, and by the time he got back to base, his squad told him luck had saved him, not a person. He'd never believed in luck. Navarro closed the file and looked through the observation window at the empty interrogation room where Cara Dune had just performed flawless CPR for 6.5 minutes straight, where she'd moved with the kind of muscle memory that didn't come from training. It came from living through situations where hesitation meant death. Alec was already heading for the door, presumably to file the incident report that would end Cara's career before it started. Navarro caught his arm. "Hold on that report, Major." "Sir, regulations require—" "I said hold." Navarro's voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of someone who had given orders in worse places than climate-controlled observation rooms. "I want medical's full analysis before we decide what happened here. Could have been underlying condition, could have been stress, could have been a dozen things. We don't write reports until we know facts." Alec's smile tightened. "Of course, Commander. Just trying to follow protocol." "Appreciate your diligence." Navarro released his arm and turned back to the window, effectively dismissing him. Alec left, boots clicking down the hallway, and Hutchins stepped forward. "You saw it too," Hutchins said quietly. "Saw what?" "That wasn't a lieutenant doing her best. That was an operator keeping someone alive until backup arrived." Navarro didn't answer directly. He just pulled up his phone again and looked at the photo of Captain Cara Voss, call sign Viper 3, who'd been dead for 3 years. The woman in the photo had the same eyes as the lieutenant in the interrogation room, same controlled breathing, same grip that turned ordinary objects into weapons. "Hutchins, you ever hear about Serpent Recon?" The older man's expression shifted. "Heard rumors. Black Ops unit, deep cover, so compartmentalized that most of Special Operations Command didn't know they existed. Supposedly got wiped out on a mission 3 years back. Total loss." "Supposedly. You think—" Hutchins stopped, looked through the observation window at the empty room where Cara had fought for 6 minutes to keep a stranger's heart beating. "Holy cow." "Don't repeat that," Navarro said. "To anyone. If I'm right, there's a reason she's here under a different name. And if I'm wrong, then we've got a lieutenant who's better trained than 90% of the operators I've worked with. Either way, someone tried to sabotage her tonight." "Exactly." Navarro pocketed his phone. "Which means someone at Blacksite knows who she really is and wants her gone. Or someone knows she's getting close to something they don't want found. Either way, we're going to watch Lieutenant Dune very carefully from now on, because if she's who I think she is, this facility just became a lot more interesting." Cara walked into the locker room at 12:23 a.m. and found her gear scattered across the floor. Someone had gone through her bag while she was in interrogation, dumping clothes and equipment in a pattern that looked random but wasn't. Her spare uniform was wadded in a corner. Her toiletries were opened, some spilled. The challenge coin with 3 snake heads was sitting on the bench in plain view, deliberately placed where anyone walking past could see it. She picked up the coin without expression, turned it over once, and pocketed it. Then she started gathering her things with the methodical patience of someone who dealt with worse invasions of privacy in worse places. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. "Rough night," Alex said from the doorway. He wasn't alone. 2 junior officers flanked him, both looking uncomfortable about whatever errand had brought them here. "Medical says Corey's stable but unresponsive. Won't be answering questions anytime soon. Real shame after all that effort." Cara folded her spare uniform and placed it back in her bag. "Commander Navarro wants a full incident report by 0600. That's 5.5 hours, Lieutenant. Think you can explain how a routine interrogation turned into a medical emergency? Or do we need to start asking harder questions about your fitness for this assignment?" She zipped the bag closed, stood, and finally looked at him. "The report will be ready, sir. I'm sure it will be thorough." Alex stepped into the locker room, hands clasped behind his back, in that parade rest stance that made everything sound official. "You know what I think happened? I think you pushed too hard, got aggressive with your questions, elevated his stress levels, triggered the cardiac event. Medical will run their tests, but between you and me, this looks like operator error." The 2 junior officers shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a young specialist named Chen, opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it when Alec glanced his way. "Detainee was stable when I entered the room," Cara said evenly. Vitals were normal according to pre-interrogation screening. Cardiac arrest occurred spontaneously during questioning. I maintained CPR until medical arrived. That's what the cameras will show. Cameras, Alex smiled. Right, cameras. Those should be interesting to review. I'm sure they'll show your technique was adequate, even if the outcome wasn't what we hoped for. He turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Dune, might want to be more careful with your personal items. Leaving challenge coins lying around, someone might get the wrong idea about where you've been, or where you think you've been. He left. The two junior officers followed. Chen looked back once, expression apologetic, before the door swung shut. Kara sat on the bench and rolled her shoulders, feeling the burn from 6 minutes of compressions settling into her muscles like hot wire. The locker room was quiet except for the ventilation system, pushing tepid air through overhead ducts. She pulled out her phone, opened an encrypted messaging app that didn't appear in any official app store, and typed 4 words: Corey compromised, Alec involved. The message disappeared 3 seconds after she hit send, self-deleting from both devices. No reply would come. That wasn't how the protocol worked, but somewhere in the intelligence apparatus that officially didn't know she existed, someone would read those 4 words and start pulling threads. She changed into a clean tank top, splashed water on her face, and headed back to the observation wing, where Navarro had set up his temporary command post. The hallways were emptier now, just a skeleton crew running overnight monitoring. Her boots echoed on polished concrete. 3 years ago, she'd walked through darker hallways and places that didn't have names, carrying equipment that didn't exist, hunting people who'd learned to hide in the cracks of failed states and forgotten borders. This should have felt safer. Climate-controlled, legal, accountable, it didn't. Navarro was reviewing footage when she arrived, his laptop open on a folding table surrounded by file boxes and equipment cases. He didn't look up when she entered, just gestured at the empty chair across from him. Sit. She sat. He spun the laptop around. The screen showed interrogation room footage from 4 different angles. Timestamp reading 11:58 p.m. Kara entering. Corey already seated. The interrogation beginning with silence, then building through psychological pressure points, then collapsing into cardiac arrest and CPR. Navarro let it play without commentary until the moment medical arrived, then paused it. 6 minutes 30 seconds of continuous compressions, he said. Rhythm stayed perfect the entire time. Most people start making mistakes around minute 4. You didn't. Training, sir. What kind of training? He didn't wait for an answer. Because I've worked with Air Force medics, Army combat lifesavers, Navy corpsmen. They're all good. Some are excellent. But what you did in that room wasn't good or excellent. It was something else. Something that comes from doing CPR in environments where, if you stop, multiple people die and the enemy doesn't care that you're trying to save lives. Kara kept her expression neutral. I appreciate the assessment, sir. That's not an assessment, that's an observation. Navarro closed the laptop. Here's another observation. Your terminal access was revoked 15 minutes before interrogation. Someone went through your locker while you were working, and Major Rowan just tried to pre-write the narrative about tonight before medical even finished their evaluation. Yes, sir. You're not surprised. No, sir. Navarro leaned back in his chair, studying her with the flat patience of someone who'd spent a career reading people in high-stakes situations. I came to Blacksite investigating leaks. Intel bleeding out to Crescent Syndicate, tipping them off before operations, keeping them 2 steps ahead. 3 shipments intercepted in 6 months, all compromised hours before raids. Someone here is feeding information to the wrong people, and I think you just got close enough to whoever it is that they decided you were a problem. Why me, sir? Because Corey wasn't just a detainee, he's a pressure point. Crescent uses him to coordinate logistics across 3 countries. If he breaks, the entire network gets exposed, including whoever's taking money to keep it protected. Navarro pulled a file from one of the boxes and opened it on the table. Satellite imagery of warehouse compounds, financial transactions flagged by Treasury, communication intercepts marked with red priority stamps. Corey should have been interrogated 2 weeks ago. Major Rowan kept delaying, citing resource constraints and scheduling conflicts. Then you got assigned the case and suddenly it's urgent, middle of the night, skeleton crew on duty, convenient timing. Kara looked at the file without touching it. The pattern was obvious when someone laid it out. delay interrogation until Crescent could arrange Corey's medical emergency, blame the new lieutenant when it went wrong, bury the case under administrative review. Clean and deniable. What do you need from me, sir? The truth. Navarro closed the file. I checked your service record, Lieutenant Cara Dune. Solid performance, no disciplinary issues, standard career progression, nothing remarkable. Nothing that explains how you accessed a maintenance backdoor that requires clearance 3 levels above your pay grade, or why you move like someone who's operated in places that don't appear on maps. The silence stretched between them. Kara's breathing stayed controlled. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. The combat breathing that had become so automatic, she didn't realize she was doing it until someone pointed it out. Navarro was waiting for her to speak, but he wasn't pushing. He'd asked a question, and now he was giving her space to decide how much truth she was willing to trade. Some things can't be explained in service records, she said finally. Because they're classified or because they don't exist? Both, sir. Navarro nodded slowly. Fair enough. Here's what I know without you telling me. Corey recognized something during interrogation. Not you specifically, but your technique. The way you asked questions, the leverage points you chose. That's not standard interrogator training. That's fieldcraft from people who operate in denied areas where mistakes get you killed. He stood and walked to the window, overlooking the facility's interior courtyard. I also know that someone at Blacksite wants you gone, which means you're a threat to something bigger than a compromised interrogation. So, I'm going to give you a choice, Lieutenant. You can file your incident report, take whatever administrative punishment Rowan engineers, and disappear back into whatever comfortable obscurity you crawled out of. Or you can help me find the leak, knowing that whoever it is has resources and protection and zero hesitation about making problems disappear. What happens if I help? We burn them out, publicly. No quiet reassignments or plea deals. Full accountability. He turned back from the window. But it won't be safe. And it might cost you more than you're willing to pay. Kara stood. I'll help. Why? Because Corey has a daughter getting married next spring. She deserves to see her father at that wedding, instead of reading about how he died in custody because someone decided profit mattered more than justice. Navarro's expression shifted, something like respect flickering across his face. Get some rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. She left the command post and walked back through empty hallways toward the dormitory wing. 3 a.m. now, the facility running on minimum staff and automated systems. She should have been exhausted. 6 minutes of CPR, hours of prep work, the emotional weight of knowing someone had tried to sabotage her and nearly killed a detainee in the process. Normal people would collapse into bed and sleep until their bodies forced them awake. Kara wasn't normal people. She diverted to the medbay instead, showed her credentials to the night nurse, and asked about Corey's condition. Stable but unconscious, induced coma while they ran cardiac panels and brain scans. She stood outside his room for 3 minutes, watching monitors beep and IV lines drip, thinking about how close she'd come to losing him. Thinking about Layla in Amman, drinking coffee with her mother, planning a wedding, unaware that her father had nearly died tonight because someone at Blacksite valued money over human lives. The nurse asked if she wanted to sit with him. Kara declined and headed back to her quarters. She locked the door, checked the room for signs of intrusion, found none, and finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion creeping in at the edges. But sleep didn't come. She lay in the narrow bunk staring at ceiling tiles, running through the chain of events, looking for the pattern that explained why tonight had escalated so quickly. Alec had motive, access, opportunity, but he was too obvious, too visible. Real operators knew how to hide. They didn't swagger around making threats and leaving evidence. Which meant either Alec was the leak and incredibly stupid, or he was a distraction covering for someone smarter. Her phone buzzed. Encrypted message from an unknown sender. Interrogation resume 0800. Corey awake. You're still assigned. Watch your back. No signature, no metadata. But the information was solid, which meant someone in the intelligence apparatus was feeding her updates through channels that didn't officially exist. She deleted the message and closed her eyes, finally allowing her body to shut down for 3 hours of sleep that felt like 3 minutes. At 7:55 a.m., she walked back into the observation room, outside interrogation chamber 4. Corey was already seated, looking pale and shaky but conscious. Medical had cleared him for limited questioning, 30-minute sessions with cardiac monitoring and a crash cart standing by. Alec was there, along with Navarro, Hutchins, and Brooks. The atmosphere felt different than last night, tighter, more people watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to hostility. "Lieutenant Dune," Alex said formally, "Medical has graciously allowed us another session with detainee 773. Commander Navarro will be observing directly. I trust you will keep this interrogation less dramatic than the previous one." "Yes, sir." She entered the interrogation room. Corey looked up, and for the first time, something like respect crossed his face. "You saved my life." "I did my job." "No." He shook his head slowly. "You fought for me when you could have let me die. That is not job. That is choice." Kara sat across from him and opened the folder, but she wasn't looking at the documents anymore. She was looking at Corey, seeing him as a person instead of a target. "Your daughter deserves to see you walk her down the aisle. Help me make that happen. If I talk, Crescent will kill her. If you don't talk, they'll kill her anyway. You saw the intercepts. They're already planning to clean up loose ends. Your cooperation buys her protection, relocation, a future. Your silence buys her a funeral." Corey closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "Route 17. The supplier is a man named Aziz Haddad. He works from a compound outside Ramadi. I can give you coordinates, schedules, security details, everything you need. And in exchange, new identity for my family, protection for Layla until the wedding. Then we disappear." Kara turned to the camera. "Commander, we have cooperation, requesting deal authorization." In the observation room, Navarro picked up the phone and made 3 calls in rapid succession. 6 minutes later, authorization came through. Corey started talking. He gave them routes, names, financial trails, warehouse locations, communication protocols. Everything Crescent had spent 5 years building, unraveled in 40 minutes by a man who'd decided his daughter mattered more than criminal loyalty. At 8:37 a.m., Kara walked out of the interrogation room with enough intelligence to dismantle 3 cells and arrest 27 people across 4 countries. Navarro met her in the hallway with an expression that might have been satisfaction or might have been vindication. "That's how it's supposed to work," he said. "Good job, Lieutenant." "Thank you, sir." Alec was notably absent from the observation room. Kara didn't ask where he had gone. She already knew. People who'd just watched their careful sabotage collapse into an intelligence windfall tended to make themselves scarce while they figured out new strategies. She was halfway to the command post when the lights went out. Not flickering, not brownout, full blackout, facility-wide, emergency lighting kicking in 3 seconds later to bathe the hallways in dim red. Alarms started shrieking. Automated lockdown protocols engaged, sealing doors with magnetic locks and dropping security barriers. Kara's hand went to her belt where a weapon should have been, but Blacksite personnel below supervisor level weren't armed inside the facility. She was functionally defenseless in a locked-down building where someone had just killed main power. Navarro's voice crackled over the PA system. "All personnel, this is Commander Navarro. We have a facility-wide power disruption. Stay in current locations, await instructions. Security teams to command post immediately." Kara didn't stay in her current location. She moved toward the command post using emergency lighting and muscle memory, navigating corridors she'd memorized during her first week. 3 turns, 2 stairwells, 1 service corridor that bypassed the main security checkpoint. She reached the command post in 4 minutes and found Navarro coordinating with security on backup comms. "Lieutenant, I told everyone to shelter in place." "Yes, sir. What do you need?" He almost smiled. "Backup generators should have kicked in automatically. They didn't. Someone manually overrode them, which means this isn't a random failure. This is someone making a move." "Alec, that'd be my guess. Question is what he's moving toward. Could be destroying evidence. Could be extracting something valuable. Could be covering his tracks before we—" The lights came back on. Not emergency lights. Full power, flooding the facility with fluorescent brightness that felt aggressive after 4 minutes of red darkness. The lockdown alarm stopped. Magnetic locks disengaged with metallic clicks, echoing through ventilation shafts. Hutchins appeared in the doorway. "Generators are back online. Maintenance says someone physically cut power at the main junction, then restored it remotely. Whole thing was controlled." "Where's Major Rowan?" Navarro asked. "Haven't seen him since interrogation ended." Navarro pulled his sidearm and chambered around. "Hutchins, take 3 security personnel and sweep detention level. I want Corey confirmed secure. Lieutenant Dune, you're with me. We're checking Rowan's office. They moved through hallways that felt different under restored lighting, like the facility itself had shown its true face during those 4 minutes of darkness and couldn't quite hide it anymore. Alec's office was on level 2, administrative wing, door closed but unlocked. Navarro entered first, weapon up, clearing corners. Empty. But his computer was still on, screen showing a file transfer window at 97% complete. Kara crossed to the desk. The transfer was uploading data to an external server. Folder labeled Crescent Logistics Archive. Thousands of files, communications, financial records, operational details. Everything that could implicate Blacksite's leak was currently being copied to a server that probably belonged to Crescent's legal team, where it would disappear into attorney-client privilege and become untouchable. "Can you stop it?" Navarro asked. Kara's fingers moved across the keyboard, opening system processes, tracing network connections. The upload was running through a VPN tunnel with military-grade encryption. Stopping it would require administrator access she didn't have, or a backdoor protocol that only 6 people in the world knew existed, 5 of whom were dead. She typed 6 lines of code, the same backdoor she'd used last night to restore her terminal access. The upload window froze at 98%, threw an error message, then crashed. Files corrupted, transfer terminated. Navarro stared at the screen. "What did you just do?" "Emergency interrupt protocol, sir. Standard defensive measure against data exfiltration." "There's nothing standard about what you just did, Lieutenant." Before Kara could answer, Brooks appeared in the doorway, out of breath and holding a tablet. "Commander, you need to see this. Security footage from level 3. She handed him the tablet. The footage showed Alec entering the main power junction room at 8:41 a.m., cutting primary feeds, then leaving. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the second timestamp, from 8:53 a.m., showing Alec entering the medical bay where Corey was recovering. The footage showed him approaching Corey's IV line, pulling something from his pocket, injecting it into the saline drip. "Holy cow," Hutchins breathed. "He's trying to finish what the cardiac arrest started." Navarro was already moving. They sprinted back to the medical bay, arriving in time to see Alex standing over Corey's bed, watching monitors that were starting to alarm. The night nurse was slumped in a chair near the door, unconscious. Corey was thrashing against restraints, eyes rolling back, the same gray color flooding his face that Kara had seen 12 hours ago. "Step away from the patient," Navarro ordered, weapon trained on Alec's center mass. Alec turned slowly, hands visible, expression calm. "Commander, I was just checking on our detainee. He started seizing. I called for help." "By injecting something into his IV? I don't know what you're talking about." Kara pushed past Navarro and went straight to Corey, yanking the IV line free, checking vitals. Pulse already. Breathing labored but present. She grabbed an oxygen mask from the wall mount and secured it over his face, then turned to the emergency drug cabinet. Locked. She drove her elbow through the glass panel, grabbed a vial of naloxone, and drew it into a syringe with hands that stayed steady through pure discipline. "You're not authorized to administer medication," Alex said. She ignored him and injected naloxone into Corey's thigh. His breathing steadied within seconds. The gray color receded, his eyes focused. Within 30 seconds, he was conscious again, confused but alive. Alex's calm facade cracked. "You had no right." "Shut up," Navarro said quietly. "Lieutenant Brooks, call 911. Tell them we need base security and medical response. Then seal this room and nobody touches anything until investigators arrive." Brooks made the call. Hutchins secured Alec in zip ties and read him his rights in a voice that carried the weight of someone who'd waited a long time to see justice actually happen. Navarro holstered his weapon and turned to Kara. "Last night you saved his life with CPR. Just now, you saved it again with a drug administration that you shouldn't know how to do. So, I'm going to ask you one more time, Lieutenant, who are you really?" Kara looked at Corey, who was watching her with the expression of someone who'd just seen a miracle twice in 12 hours. Then she looked at Navarro, at Hutchins, at Brooks, at people who'd witnessed something they couldn't quite explain and were waiting for an explanation that made sense. She pulled off her EMT jacket for the second time in 12 hours, leaving just the black tank top underneath. The prep room's fluorescent lights were one thing, but medical bay lighting was different, specialized, full spectrum. the kind that revealed things normal lighting couldn't. And in that light, running the entire length of her spine, previously invisible under regular conditions, a tattoo began to glow with faint blue luminescence. Not ink, not exactly. Something else. Something that only appeared under specific wavelengths, designed to be hidden in plain sight until the exact moment revelation couldn't be avoided. The letters were clear now, each one precisely formed, military stencil font, running from the base of her neck to her lower back. V Sigma 3. Below that, coordinates, 34 north 48 east. And woven through the text, a stylized serpent with 3 heads, each facing a different direction, each watching a different horizon. Brooks dropped her tablet. The crash echoed in the sudden silence. Hutchins stood frozen, eyes locked on the tattoo, like he'd just seen a ghost walk through the wall. Navarro's expression went through shock, recognition, and something close to reverence in the span of 3 seconds. Then he did something Kara hadn't seen a SEAL commander do in her entire career. He stood to attention and rendered a full salute, crisp and formal, the kind reserved for officers of significantly higher rank. "Captain," he said quietly, "my apologies. I didn't recognize you without the call sign." "Captain?" Brooks whispered. "But she's—" "Viper 3, Hutchins finished. "Serpent Recon, the unit that officially doesn't exist anymore." Alec, still zip-tied, looked like he'd seen his own execution order signed and dated. His face went from angry to pale to something approaching terrified in the time it took Kara to turn and face him directly. 3 years ago, she said, her voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before, someone sold our coordinates to Crescent Syndicate. We were running deep cover in denied territory, tracking weapons shipments that were getting people killed. Someone took money to give up our position. 4 of my team died in the ambush that followed. 2 of us survived, but barely. I requested KIA status, changed my identity, and came back as Lieutenant Cara Dune, because I knew the traitor was still inside the system. I knew if I appeared weak and vulnerable, if I let myself be underestimated and mocked and pushed around, eventually the person who sold us out would feel safe enough to move again. She took 3 steps toward Alec. Navarro didn't stop her. "I wore your contempt like armor, Major. Every insult, every obstacle, every attempt to make me quit. I let you think you'd won because invisible operators see everything. And while you were busy sabotaging interrogations and cutting power and trying to kill witnesses, I was watching you, documenting you, building a case that's now sitting on Commander Navarro's desk, with enough evidence to put you in military prison for the rest of your life." Alec opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You weren't my enemy," Kara continued. "Our blindness was. The system's blindness. The assumption that someone like me couldn't possibly be a threat. That assumption kept me invisible long enough to watch you make every mistake I needed you to make. If you believe justice should be patient, smash that subscribe button." Part 2 of Kara's mission drops next week. Security arrived 9 minutes later, with MPs, investigators, and a JAG officer who took one look at the scene and immediately requested JSOC oversight. Alec was formally arrested on charges of treason, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit espionage, and accepting bribes from a foreign entity. His computer was seized, his office was sealed, his bank records were subpoenaed and revealed $470,000 in transfers from shell companies connected to Crescent Syndicate. Brooks provided chat logs showing Alec coordinating with Crescent contacts, tipping them off about operations, arranging for Corey's cardiac event through a contact who'd administered a delayed-release drug during the pre-interrogation medical screening. The drug was designed to trigger heart failure at a specific time, making it look like natural causes brought on by interrogation stress. Kara's CPR had kept Corey alive long enough for the drug to metabolize, which was the only reason he'd survived. Corey gave a formal statement identifying Alec as the person who'd threatened his daughter to keep him from cooperating. He provided additional details about Crescent's network, including the names of 3 other facilities where leaks had been suspected but never proven. JSOC launched simultaneous raids across 4 countries, arrested 29 people, and seized enough weapons to supply a small war. The consequence cascade moved fast. Alec was remanded to military custody at 0 consequences for the system. Within 24 hours, JSOC initiated a facility-wide review of security protocols. 12 additional personnel were placed on administrative leave pending investigation into their connections with Crescent financial networks. 3 were eventually charged. 9 were cleared, but required retraining in compartmentalization and operational security. Kara's rank was officially restored to captain. JSOC offered her command of a rebuilt Serpent unit, pending security clearances and psychological evaluation. She requested 72 hours to consider it. Brooks personally apologized in front of the entire facility staff, then provided detailed testimony that helped investigators map out the full scope of Alec's network. She was reassigned to intelligence analysis with a formal letter of reprimand for participating in harassment, but also a commendation for coming forward with evidence when it mattered. Hutchins received a formal recognition for his observational skills and willingness to trust instinct over assumption. He spent 3 hours walking Kara through stories about Gulf War operations, swapping tactical philosophy, 2 veterans who'd operated in different eras but recognized the same DNA in each other's experience. Navarro pulled Kara aside on the 3rd day, after most of the chaos had settled into paperwork and procedure. They stood in the same observation room where he had first started questioning who she really was. "You could have revealed yourself earlier," he said, "saved yourself a lot of grief." "If I'd revealed myself earlier, Alec never would have made his move. He'd have disappeared into retirement with his money and his secrets, and Crescent would have just found another leak. This way, we burned out the infection completely. Patient justice, the only kind that lasts." Navarro handed her a folder. "Corey's family has been relocated. New identities, protection detail until the wedding. Layla doesn't know the details, just that her father's cooperation bought them all a second chance. She's grateful." Kara opened the folder, saw photos of a young woman in Amman, smiling over coffee, planning a wedding that would now actually happen. She closed the folder carefully. "There's something else," Navarro continued. He pulled out a tablet and opened an encrypted message. "This arrived on secure channels 2 hours ago. No sender identification, but the encryption matches protocols used by units that officially don't exist." The message read, "Serpent 456 still breathing. Crescent head confirmed. Coordinates incoming. Tower sends regards." Kara stared at the screen. 3 members of her original team, listed as KIA for 3 years, confirming they were alive and still hunting the same enemy from inside enemy territory. A map appeared below the text, showing 3 red markers, 1 in southern Russia, 1 in northern Syria, 1 in Yemen. "They never shed their skin," Hutchins said from the doorway, where he'd been listening without announcement. "They just waited." "Waited for what?" Navarro asked. "For someone to prove the system still worked," Kara said quietly. "For proof that coming back in from the cold wouldn't just get them killed by the same people who sold them out the first time." She memorized the coordinates, then deleted the message. The map disappeared, the markers vanished, but the information stayed burned into her memory with the permanence of coordinates tattooed in invisible ink. "So what now?" Navarro asked. "Now, I take 72 hours to consider JSOC's offer." "And after that?" Kara looked at the blank screen where her teammates' locations had been displayed for 9 seconds before disappearing back into the operational darkness where serpents lived. "After that, Commander, I'm going hunting, because justice isn't loud, it's patient. And serpents strike when you've forgotten we're there." She walked out of the observation room, through hallways that felt different now that people knew who she really was. Some looked at her with respect, others with curiosity, a few with the kind of reverence reserved for people who died and come back. She didn't acknowledge any of it, just walked with the same controlled pace she'd maintained as Lieutenant Dune, because names and ranks didn't change what you were underneath. At the facility exit, she paused and pulled out the challenge coin. 3 serpent heads forming a triangle, each facing outward, watching 3 horizons. She rubbed her thumb over the worn brass, feeling the weight of 3 years and 4 dead teammates and 3 who'd refused to stay dead. A young private walking past saw the coin and stopped. "Ma'am, is that real?" "Real as anything that matters, Private. I heard stories about Serpent Recon. People say they're ghosts." Kara pocketed the coin and looked at the private with eyes that had seen too much darkness to be bothered by ghost stories. "Ghosts haunt the past, Private. Serpents hunt the future. There's a difference." She walked out into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright after 3 years of living in shadows. Somewhere in Russia, Syria, and Yemen, 3 operators who officially didn't exist were moving through their own shadows, hunting the same enemy, waiting for the signal that said it was time to come home or time to finish what they'd started. Tower had sent regards. The message was received. And somewhere in the organizational machinery that built units like Serpent and then pretended they'd never existed, someone was preparing missions that would bring them all back together or scatter them across graveyards in 3 different countries. Kara didn't know which outcome waited in her future, didn't particularly care. She'd spent 3 years being underestimated, dismissed, mocked by people who thought ink and gender and visible weakness meant you couldn't be dangerous. She'd just shown them exactly how wrong assumptions could be. And somewhere, in rooms without names, people who made careers out of underestimating others were learning a lesson that serpents had taught for generations. Silence isn't weakness, patience isn't surrender, and the most dangerous operators are the ones you never see coming until it's too late to do anything except stand at attention and salute the damage they have already done. Justice wasn't loud, but when it finally struck, everyone heard it, even the ghosts. Kara's phone buzzed one final time. Another encrypted message, 3 words that needed no explanation. Phase 2 initiated. She deleted it, turned toward the setting sun, and smiled for the second time in 3 years. Somewhere beyond that horizon, 3 serpents were waking up. And Crescent Syndicate had no idea what patient hunters looked like when they finally stopped waiting. The hunt had just begun. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.